Coming up on Chasing the Natty, we have our last spring games trickling in for the 2025 season, but let's be real. You guys don't want to talk about that. You guys want to talk about all of this spring transfer portal news happening the last couple of weeks. Well, you're in luck, as we'll be deep diving into the transfers that are shaking up the 2025 CFF season. We'll also then, at the end of the show, be discussing those last few spring games and what little takeaways we can take from them. We've got all of that and more coming right after this.
Sellers picks his way to the right and is tripped up, reaching for the end zone. Touchdown. What a start.
Give it to Reed, and there he goes. Nobody's going to catch him. Touchdown.
It's caught. Jeremiah Smith. Touchdown, Ohio State. The legend grows.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. We are the College Fantasy Football Podcast on the Campus of Canton Podcast Network. You can find us on all of your podcast feeds and on YouTube every Monday morning during the season at 6 a.m. sharp. If you want to support the great work we do here, head on over to campusofcanton.com and subscribe there with any of our phenomenal tiers. You have content ranging on all sorts of college football games, whether it's CFF, Devy, C2C, College IDP, College DFS, Underdog Best Ball. Really, if you play it, then we've got content, whether that's tools, rankings, podcasts, everything you need to succeed. In fact, right now, if you want to support the show even further, make sure when you sign up for one of our yearly membership tiers, you use the promo code NATTY, N-A-T-T-Y, to get 10% off on your yearly membership. Those yearly memberships, by the way, are worth their weight in gold. You get access to our guides. If you get the NIL yearly membership, you get access to every single one of our guides for free. It is absolutely worth every penny. If you can't do stuff like that, though, no problem. You can always just show us some love by leaving a like, a comment, and subscribe on the YouTube side of things. On the podcast side of things, you can leave a 5-star review. Make sure you're following the show. Not only does that show us support, but also the game of college fantasy football in general, a ton of support. If you have any further questions or just want to get in touch for whatever reason, you can find me and the show on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. The show is at Chasing the Natty, and the handsome fellow joining me today is Mr. Eliot Mays at Eliot Mays, aka Bacon Fueled Sports on Twitter. Eliot, welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
I'm glad to have you back on, man. Again, last time we did this show, it was an awesome show, and without it really being said, that's why I wanted you back on here, man. What kind of stuff have you been working on, man? I know we're getting out of the spring portal here and everything like that. We're kind of getting ready to be, I don't want to call it the doldrums of CFF, but we're not going to have as much, news coming out with the spring portal closing here over the last couple of days. We obviously saw some guys that need to find their spots and everything, but there's no practices. There's not going to be as much digging through every, 247 on 3 article that we can find and stuff like that. All right. So I guess what will you be working on over the next couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of weeks, it's been just updating player rankings as news breaks, and guys get kind of slid around, trying to get that all pieced together, at least for the spring, to continue doing best balls throughout the summer. I just recently updated my rankings to include groups, so kind of being able to group the rankings by either group of 5 or power 4. Obviously,
very nice.
Underdog best balls that should be starting up this summer, kind of getting prepped for that, but also the earlier best balls are usually a full FBS, but we're going to start seeing group of 5 only and power 4 only stuff. Lord have mercy with the group of 5. That's going to be pretty rough with some of the portal transfers, but yeah, so that's what I've been working on. I'll probably continue working on a lot of data-driven infographics that I'll be posting on X as well, and just continue working on that. Most of the summer, at least in the next month, I'll probably be working on focusing primarily on schedules and kind of analyzing those and trying to identify good schedules and bad schedules that are useful from a fantasy perspective, and kind of analyzing those. And then I'm still in the midst of working on a prop tool that I had working last year. It broke. I fixed it, but I'm updating it as well to include both prize pick lines as well as underdog lines for player props. So gonna focus on trying to crank that out before the season kicks off. That's I guess the big project.
Well, that'll be huge for everybody doing prop bets, right? Because half the battle is going through the different books and determining which one's actually going to offer you the best edge compared to whatever your projections are kind of spitting out, right? So just be able to have that all in
Yep.
one place rather than having to go back and forth between all the different ones. You said underdog and prize picks. I forget, is FanDuel and all of them still put out props and everything, or did they stop that?
They do, but as I mentioned the last time I was on here, I kind of do things to scratch my own itch, and selfishly, Texas does not allow some of those books. I'm basically only allowed to use quote unquote fantasy books like Prize Picks, Underdog, Fliff, etc.
Isn't it
So
funny
I don't
how
have access to DraftKings and FanDuel, which I would prefer. I would much prefer that, being able to lay down prop bets on individuals as opposed to straight parlaying every single thing is not ideal.
I've been on this rant before where again it just really goes to show just how clueless a lot of these politicians that write these like gambling laws and stuff are, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we can't let them do just straight gambling because that's predatory, but we will allow, you know, companies that only allow you to do parlays, which are the most predatory gambling setup you could possibly have. They have zero problem
Yeah.
with that. Again, they just don't know what they're talking about. And like I'm one of these people where like I haven't really talked about this on the show and everything, but like I try not to do like gambling content. I do like try to do
Sure.
only fantasy
Yeah.
content because like I've seen it, especially in my younger generation here and everything, where a lot of a lot of guys in my generation do struggle with this. So, like I'm not trying to propagate that as much, but like
Sure.
at the same time, like it is frustrating, even as somebody who kind of leans that way on it. Like the politicians just having no idea of what they're talking about when it comes to this. It just blows my mind. But that's a different conversation
Yeah.
for
A
a
lot of
different.
issues.
That's a different conversation for a different day. Exactly. Yeah, you're not wrong about it being more than just that issue. But we got a ton of fun stuff here today. We'll talk about these spring portals. We got a couple of spring games that are kind of trickling here in and out. I really wish in the future they would kind of spread out the spring games just a little bit more. I'm getting tired of like the 2 weekends in April where it feels like, you know, 50 teams here, 50 teams here, and then like 15 teams the next week. And I'm just like, okay, we spread this out just a little bit more. Um, Oh yeah, we got spring portal guys. We got those. One thing I do need to talk about, just a reminder to you all out there that are listening: if you love the game of college fantasy, there is something that we need your help on, and that is setting up the Tadpole Bowl. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that is the college version of the Scott Fish Bowl. It is the first time that we are holding a competition like this. It is going to be hosted by the legendary Scott Fish and our own great buddy Eric Froton. He has been working tirelessly to get this set up, and it is, like I said, going to be a college version of the Scott Fish Bowl. For those of you who don't know what the Scott Fish Bowl is, it's a massive tournament on the NFL fantasy side of things where you get placed into a pot of 12 drafters and you're all part of the same league. I think last year the Scott Fish Bowl had over 4,000 participants in it, and it's all one giant league. So you basically, the first several weeks of the season, you're just trying to win your pod, and then like the top one or two people make it out, move on to the playoffs, and you just kind of go from there. And so, the Tadpole Bowl is going to be Power Four only. It's going to be set up, like I said, just like the pro version of the bowl. So you'll have transactions. You'll be able to start and sit. It's not going to be a best ball format or anything. It will be a league that you're going to be pretty involved in. It is a charity league, which is obviously great. We're partnering with Fantasy Cares to kind of get that set up. And our goal is to have 50 pools of 12 different drafters each. So if you got friends that are just kind of interested, want to dip their toes into the game of college fantasy without there really being like any high monetary stakes or anything, this is a great opportunity to do that and bring your friends involved. You can go to scottfishbowl.com/college. You can sign up there. And there's a couple opportunities for participating in live drafts this year if you're interested. I know they got one set up from Minneapolis and Las Vegas. We're working to set up one here in Atlanta. And Elliot, I know you're talking with Josh Chevalier about potentially getting one set up down there in Austin. You excited about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would be willing to travel, but if I don't have to, I'd prefer not to.
It's like, it's one thing like us down here in the South, right? It'd be one thing if it was like, oh, we got a live draft in Nashville. I'd be like, okay, I can drive, 2.5 hours to Nashville.
Sure. Yeah.
It's another thing when it's like, oh, I got to drive 14 hours to Minneapolis. I don't know if I can really, or buy a plane ticket, which who can afford that in this economy?
Right.
But yeah, like I said, it's going to be a fun time, y'all. If you got any questions about signing up for it and everything, like, please feel free to reach out to me. By the way, I will go ahead and do a FAQ here. You'll see something that says like SFBID. That is not a Scottfish bid. That is a Scottfish Bowl ID. So you don't have to put down monetary value in order to enter in the draft. I've had people ask me, they're just like, what is this bid that's on the sign up page? I'm like, it's not a bid. It's SFB ID. There's a space, and there should be a space between the B and I, in my opinion. I'm rambling now. Let's get into the fun stuff here, Eliot. Let's go talk about some of these spring portal guys.
Let's do it.
We're gonna do this about 5 players at a time, and we'll start here with the quarterbacks. Of course, we got to start with Nico Iamaleava, the former 5-star quarterback, the former $7 million man, going from Tennessee over to UCLA. Of course, also on the page here, I have Joey Aguilar, the other half of this pseudo trade that has occurred here between UCLA and Tennessee, with Aguilar going from UCLA back to Tennessee. I also have on here Steve Angeli, the loser of the Notre Dame quarterback battle, headed over to Syracuse. I also have Gio Lopez, the former starting quarterback out of South Alabama, transferred out and is now headed to North Carolina, where he will be assumingly be the starting quarterback for Bill Belichick's Tar Heels over there. And then the last guy I threw on here, I kind of threw him in here to fill the graphic a little bit, I'll be real. But also I want to discuss this quarterback room, and that is the quarterback room that Gio Lopez just came from. And the quarterback is Zach Pyron, the former Minnesota and Georgia Tech quarterback, who is now headed over to South Alabama. We'll discuss what we think is going to happen there. But, Elliot, we have to start with Nico Iamaleava here, going from Tennessee to UCLA. I'm going to throw in Iamaleava and Aguilar in here a little bit together, right? Because I think, in my opinion, from a fantasy perspective, we could talk about like all the, the actual implications of this and like how it's affecting the sport of college football, but just from a fantasy perspective, I think that if you're basing this based off system and their talent, right? I think that obviously you have to move Aguilar up because I think he's going to a much better situation than UCLA. I think you have to move Nico down because he's going from a great CFF system to, at the very least, an unknown situation there at UCLA. Obviously, Sunseri is a guy coming from a system we like there at Indiana, so that could still work out. But I've definitely moved him down. Like, I had Nico in my top 40. I've moved him down to QB 62 because of this. I didn't even rank Joey Aguilar at UCLA. That was just completely unappetizing for me over there. But now I have him at QB 58. What did you kind of do with your ranking of these two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I had both of them ranked prior to this, but I did move Nico back a little bit and Joey up a little bit. I don't know exactly. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly where I had Nico, but I think he was in the mid to upper 30s, and right now I've got him at 56. And then Joey Aguilar, I ended up bringing him up to like, I'm not super high on him even at Tennessee, and that could be a mistake, but I'm willing to roll that dice with the depth at quarterback. I've got him ranked 74th, and I think he's probably deserving of a higher rating than that, or a higher ranking than that. But I kind of want to see how things play out a little bit further, and we'll kind of get a better look at that in fall camp.
the system's certainly carrying him, right? Because I don't think like I said,
Yeah,
if he, at
for sure.
UCLA, I wasn't interested in him. Even if he stayed at App State, I'm not even sure really how interested I would have been in him this year. Because what did he finish as last year at App State? I know the year before finished really well, and that's why everybody was kind of on board with him. Yeah, he finished his QB 37 last year, so not like a complete disappointment, right? But definitely not a very high ceiling there, even at App State. Um, I actually did have Joey pass Nico, which kind of surprised me when when it was all said and done. That might end up changing because I'm with you, Eliot. I don't think Aguilar's a very good quarterback. I think there's a decent chance that he may not even end up starting for Tennessee. Like I think that Tennessee saw Nico go into the portal, thought they were going to be able to, pry somebody away from some of these other schools, and then when that didn't happen, they're like, okay, let's just go get the guy that's obviously going to transfer out of UCLA over there, and let's just add a guy to our quarterback room that clearly another school thought was a Power 4 level starter, and we have one of the simpler offenses for a quarterback to pick up, so let's just grab him and see what happens. What about Steve Angeli
Yeah, it
here?
might.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you clearly had a much more interesting thought. Let's hear it.
I was just going to add in, it could have been a depth move. I doubt it based on the price they're kind of throwing at him, but I would anticipate that he starts. Otherwise, they wouldn't have paid him the amount that they're supposedly paying him, I think.
Fair. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I probably should have considered that a bit more. What about Steve Angeli here? Former quarterback out of Notre Dame, was battling for that starting job. It looks like, based on the spring game, based on what we were kind of hearing later in the spring reports, that CJ Carr has started to pull away with that, and Angeli leaving now kind of solidifies that in my mind that that's Carr's job. Angeli's headed out. He is now going to Syracuse. This is kind of a strange move a little bit. I'm not entirely sure exactly how to read this because we just saw Ricky Collins being named the starter by Fran Brown. But then Collins gets injured. He misses the spring game, and now they bring in Angeli here. I don't know. It part of me wants to like take Fran Brown's face value of like, well, yeah, maybe Collins is still the starter here, and maybe we'll see what happens with Angeli. But this feels like a very weird move for Syracuse to make if they really thought that Collins was kind of their solidified starter. How are you reading this?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably lower on Collins than most. Like nothing against the guy. I mean, it was more of a system play, I think, for most people's rankings. I think most people were a little more excited about him than I was. I'm kind of cheating right now because I have Angeli and Collins both back to back in my rankings at 72 and 73rd. But as far as quarterbacks are concerned, so a little bit of cheating, a little bit of wait and see there. But my gut actually tells me Angeli is going to be the guy. But I agree. I think it is a little bit unusual for them to kind of make an announcement that early. But as of right now, from a fantasy perspective, I probably won't be taking any of them outside of a very, very late round pick. And that would be, once again, a system play. And if I were taking one of the two, it'd probably be Angeli, but I'd probably be wrong and regret it later on. So
It doesn't really matter when it's like what your seventh quarterback off the board, considering where they've been going. Because like where is where's Collins? Hardly at all. It looks.
I mean, he went off. He's been going off. Like I think in the second Champion Series was where I saw him go off the earliest, and that was like in the 17th round.
Yeah, I think I've been seeing him go a little bit later than that, but those champions.
Yeah, that was the earliest he's gone.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I misheard you then.
Yep.
And then, like I mentioned, Steve Angeli leaves Notre Dame. That basically gave me the all clear to add CJ Carr into my rankings. I think you have to have a Mike Denbrock in your CFF rankings. I had him settle down as QB 46. I could very well rise up my rankings a little bit. I need to kind of look into how mobile CJ Carr is. Obviously, he's a former 5-star quarterback, so that's very exciting to have in a Mike Denbrock offense there. What about you, Eliot? Where did you kind of settle in with CJ Carr entering your rankings, if he has it all?
Yeah, I mean, I've got him. He was in my rankings before, but he was very deep, and I've got him right now at 53rd, and he's kind of nestled in there with like Miller Moss, DJ Lagway, and kind of that area.
Hmm. What about Gio Lopez here? Former quarterback out of South Alabama, headed over to North Carolina, looks to be Bill Belichick's quarterback. It makes sense, right? Like Bill Belichick wasn't going to go into the season with, a banged up Max Johnson and potentially Bryce Baker as a true freshman quarterback starting for him. Lopez, pretty much as soon as he entered the portal, was being crystal balled to go here. As far as I'm concerned, Lopez is taking a pretty big hit in CFF value with this transfer, right? Not only because you have a G5 guy moving up to the Power 4, even though it is the ACC, and I do think that jumps a little bit easier than, say, a guy moving from the Sun Belt to the Big Ten. We're also putting him into an offensive system that we really don't know what to expect from at all, right? Obviously, Bill Belichick has put together some really nice offenses at the NFL level, but we saw as the years kind of went on that he's kind of fallen behind. Does he come to the college ranks and adapt, or does he try to do the same old thing that he had been doing in the NFL? Does the same old thing that he had been doing then in the NFL work at the college level, right? Because it's a much more professionally run organization. I don't know. That's kind of the main problem here, right? Is that so much becomes unknown now with Gio Lopez and what this offense around him is going to look at like. It's not enough to make Lopez fall out of my rankings, but he's definitely a far cry from the QB 25 I had him as back at South Alabama. What about you, Eliot?
Yeah, I mean, I bumped him up a decent amount. I mean, he's still definitely ranked. I have him ranked 44th, which might be a little bit optimistic, but um, I'm basing that on him as the player and his, abilities and skill set. I don't think I think the move was good, obviously, for him. I think it was ultimately, like you said, bad for owners of Giovanni Lopez, but I don't think it makes him irrelevant. I just think it makes him less relevant. And so my issue there is that, from what I can tell, based on news coming out of North Carolina, is Belichick. You were talking about it being a business. Belichick's got it queued up just like that. He's got players coming back in and saying, "Oh, this is significantly more difficult than it was before," and tightening the belt might be the right call for that program. But from what I can tell, I think it's going to be pretty heavily, run first. But we'll see how that goes. And I mean, it's not like Giovanni Lopez is him and Tom Brady are not really. They don't have a whole lot of parallels in their games, I don't
No.
think. So it's going to be different, obviously, than what he was running in the NFL. But to what degree is still kind of up in the air.
I mean, a run first offense isn't necessarily a death nail here for
Sure. Yeah.
Lopez at all, right? Give a lot of RPOs, get a lot of option plays here. There's plenty of opportunities for Lopez to use his legs. I'm sure they'll probably encourage him to use his legs a little bit as well on scrambles and stuff like that if they feel like the passing game breaks down. Because let's be real, off the top of your head, Elliot, like who are the pass catchers here at North Carolina that you're really believing in right now?
There's not many.
Is Chris Culliver still there? Did he ever enter the portal? I can't remember. I can't even remember anymore.
Mm,
Actually, you know what? You know what I can do? I can go over to our handy dandy 2025 CFB Winning Edge returning production database. There's my plug for the episode.
we can see who can pull it up faster.
I am on it. Wide receivers: JJ Jones gone, Copenhaver gone, Nesbitt gone, Kobe Paysour still around, Chris Culliver still around,
That's
Jordan Ship still around. So they got some pieces there that could be fun. Gavin Blackwell still around as well. So maybe not all is lost on that passing game. None of those guys are being
yeah.
drafted right now.
Paysour would be the one that I would probably be interested in out of the bunch there the most.
I would definitely agree, especially the Pacor plays the slot, correct? Okay, he's actually in that same role as like Jamal Pritchett in them, where he kind of is in that balanced role. He's 65% out wide, 35% inside. So maybe now again, obviously different offensive system, right? But at the same time, that's kind of what Gio Lopez has been trained to look for with Jamal Pritchett last year. So shall definitely see. Any other thoughts on Lopez before we move on?
Nope.
Last one here. This one will be real quick. But Zach Pyron, quarterback in Minnesota, going to South Alabama. I'm more interested in just discussing the South Alabama quarterback room a little bit here because, again, we all thought Gio Lopez, I had him as a top 25 quarterback for CFF. A lot of that has to do with the system and the fact that this is like Major Applewhite's willing to let his quarterbacks run. Carter Bradley was decently solid at South Alabama here. Pyron comes in here, former blue chip prospect at Georgia Tech, went to Minnesota. Now he is moving down a level, so technically big fish, small pond potential here. But Bishop Davenport still hanging around. He started the bowl game for South Alabama, and he looked pretty solid, right? 15 for 24, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, 85 yards rushing on the ground. Like, dude looked great. 35 fantasy points. I'll take that if that's what he's going to give us. Granted, he was playing against Western Michigan, which is, not very well known for its defense here. I'm personally leaning towards Davenport being the starter here, and I'll be adding him to my rankings. Eliot, who do you have starting here between these two, and where do you have them ranked, if at all?
So I actually don't have them ranked right now, but I do lean Davenport for sure. Pyron's interesting. Obviously they had to bring somebody in just from a depth perspective, and obviously losing Gio was a huge hit to that offense. But he's an Alabama native, so he's kind of coming back home in that regard. His performance at Georgia Tech, I think he played in like 18 or 19 games, was definitely less than stellar. I think he had more interceptions than he did touchdowns during that time. But he is a bit of a dual threat guy, so that's a positive. And he has a couple years of eligibility left. So it's one of those things where I could see him getting the nod. I could see him starting. But I think he's going to have to earn that spot to get the nod. But right now, if I were to put one in, it would be Davenport. But that's another one where I'm gonna have to kind of wait and see because I'm not probably going to draft either of them, even though from a system perspective, it's somebody you may want a piece of.
All right, let's move on to some of these running backs here. We got 10 running backs that we'll end up discussing here. We'll start with our first 5 here, and that's Jaden Ott, try that again, Jared. Jaden Ott, the running back, headed from Cal to Oklahoma. We'll kind of start here, Eliot, and this is kind of a weird one to me, right? Because obviously Ben Arbuckle running backs are something we've been avoiding the last few years, although Wayshawn Parker did kind of have a couple of spike games last year. But it is also odd to me that Oklahoma would tamper and apparently pay the amount they did on Ott to come to Oklahoma when, in my opinion, like they didn't have a stellar running back room. Like there was no star there, but they had a decent amount of guys between Tatum and Gavin Sawchuk and stuff like that. And Javante Barnes was serviceable, as like an RB3 kind of guy there, right? But they're like bringing in Ott, paying him a decent amount. In my opinion, that kind of tells me RB1 money for them. So I think they plan on utilizing him in a pretty big way. That's just not really what we've seen out of Ben Arbuckle's offenses. So I'm like kind of, I don't really know what to do here. Up until this point, Ott's been, drafted end of the 6th round, RB34. I've dropped him. I think I had him right around that RB30 range. I've dropped him down to RB50. Because like part of me is like, they paid him like a workhorse back, but we've just not seen workhorse backs under Ben Arbuckle. How are you reading this?
Yeah, I mean, I had to bump him up a little bit too. I was actually not as high on him as a lot of people were. I had him ranked 28th before he transferred. And then I saw him, get transferred over to Oklahoma. I did take him in. I had 0 shares of him, and I actually took him when he left California and had yet to declare where he was going. So there was a really small window there, and that's the only share I have of him. And immediately after that, I was like, well, that was a mistake. Because I ended up taking him, like you said, kind of end of the 6th round, beginning of the 7th. I just saw him sliding, and I was like, you know what? We'll see where he goes and see how it plays out. And I don't think it hurts him incredibly, but I do think it's definitely a hit. Right now I have him ranked 42nd, which might be a little bit generous, but I'm not convinced that the offense that Oklahoma is going to run is going to be a one-for-one replication of what Arbuckle's run in the past. I think that it certainly will be heavily influenced in that regard, and we should see should have some sort of expectation there. But in the SEC, I think that it's going to morph in some way. It's just to what degree. And I think having a guy like Ott who can both run the ball but also catch the ball out of the backfield pretty well is going to be useful in that regard.
No, he definitely kind of reminds you a little bit of like Wayshawn Parker last year, because Parker was pretty solid out of the backfield as well. And when Ott gets loose, he can be very, very productive. Although last year he never really got loose. I think what he was averaging 2.9 yards per carry. Definitely not one of Ott's best years. And we'll discuss his partner in crime from last year here in a little bit. Well, let's move on to our second running back here, Eliot. Freddie Brock, former Georgia State running back here, headed over to Oklahoma State. The $1 million question is clear here, Eliot, in my opinion. Is this your next Ollie Gordon, Jalen Warren, Chuba Hubbard, Justice Hill, Mike Gundy, RB1 bazooka here? All right. Oklahoma State also brings in Oklahoma transfer Khalib Hicks. They return Sesi Balahi, Trent Howland, and Rodney Fields, none of whom were really that impressive last year. And none of these guys are really going very high in drafts, right? Balahi is RB11 ADP, or RB111, excuse me, in ADP. Trent Howland's RB121. Rodney Fields isn't even being drafted right now. I'm personally slotting in Freddie Brock here at RB60. I'm personally concerned. I don't know if Brock, especially coming up from the G5 here to the Big 12, makes that transition as quick as we want him to, but it's also Mike Gundy. I'm not even sure he really cares at that point. So I got him at RB60. Is that a fair ranking for him, Eliot, or how do you feel about him?
I think that's a extremely fair ranking, especially if you knew. I think it'd be more than fair if you knew he was going to get the nod. I mean, I think he'd be higher than that probably if you knew for a fact that he was going to get it. My concern is that I'm not convinced that he's the guy yet. Rodney Fields is somebody that had a really good spring game. He's been highly talked about to some degree. I know he's not a big running back. I think he weighs like 185 or something like that. But and as far as experience is concerned, not a ton of experience running the ball. But I'm just not sure that running back group is solidified at all at this point. I think you're going to have to wait through the summer to really get any more data off of it. Obviously, Freddie Brock at Georgia State was great. I think that I would have loved to see him stay there, but transferring to Oklahoma State as far as moving up to a program is probably about as good of a program as you can expect from a fantasy perspective. So there's reason to be optimistic, but it's not a position group that I'm going to be really targeting anyone in specifically. Once again, I might take a dart throw, but my suspicion is that there will be many other people that will be willing to throw it further and sooner than I will be.
I'm trying to take a look here at the draft that I've done that's kind of that's gotten pretty late. Yeah, Freddie Brock, the most recent draft that I was in, was taken round 16. That's definitely too rich for me currently. If he can kind of make it into that back 10 rounds of the draft, I'm more than willing to kind of take the shot there. But let's see who else we got.
So I was going to say I had one that just finished yesterday, one of many, and he went off in the 21st round in that one. So definitely slid back a little bit further. That's close to where I would be willing to. At that point in the draft, I'm taking dart throws most of the time anyway.
Okay, so here now I'm sitting here being like, I'm not sure what to think anymore, because I have him ranked as RB60, right? Do you know when the typical RB60 comes off the board?
I mean, I can tell you where my RB60 comes off the board, but I don't have ADP up right now.
I got my ADP up right now, and the RB60 is usually Malik Sherrod, and that's round 13.
That's exactly who I have as my RB60, which is ironic.
That's super funny. So,
Yeah, so that's kind of like right around the 15th round.
yeah, according to this, I should be taking Brock in the 13th, 14th round, but like that feels icky. That feels real icky to me. I'm not sure. So
I guess it just depends on how you drafted earlier in the draft. If you were targeting a lot of solidified RB1s, it's worth it. But if
yeah,
if you've been kind of piecemealing your running backs together in those mid rounds, then you may want to find something a little more solid.
no, I agree. Freddie Brock certainly feels like a home run or like a grand slam kind of pick right now, where you pick your safe guys to get you on second and third base, get a guy with a single, and then Brock could come in here and just take your team to a whole nother level if he does work out in that range. Next guy here, Rashad Amos, the man of 1,000 schools, headed from Memphis to Georgia State. Spent one spring with Memphis. And we could talk a little bit briefly at the end here about what this means for the Memphis backs as well. But Amos is heading to Georgia State, which again we just were talking about. Freddie Brock left that running back room. All they had left really was DJ Braswell and true freshman Tojuan Payton, who we at Campus Canton really, really like, and we were kind of hoping that maybe he would have the opportunity to kind of break out early here. But on paper, Amos should be the most talented back heading into this room. I'm not so sure that he's talented enough to really, command a workhorse load. And even that may not really matter, considering that Amos may not even be around by the time the fall comes if you look at recent history with this band. We don't have a ton of extensive history on what Del McGee wants to do at the running back position, whether it's committee, workhorse, and everything like that. He does come from Georgia, which has in recent years been relying on a committee approach. But if we just take what we saw last year, Brock was the clear RB1 for Georgia State compared to the rest of the people in that backfield, but he was still only averaging about 12, 13 carries a game. So I'm personally staying away from this just because of the volatility of Amos and not really knowing where he's going to end up next. Where he transfers could very well possibly be based on whether or not he had a chicken or a sausage biscuit that morning. So, Elliot, how are you feeling about this? I know guys like Mike Bainbridge are kind of excited about this transfer here. Where do you kind of fall?
I mean, I like it. I was De Rose was a guy that I was a fan of, so I was not happy that Amos was there. But seeing him move to Georgia State, I think he's going to just truck over people. I mean, he's a big body back, and he's going to be in a conference where they're going to be able to use him, I think, as an RB1, as a lead back if they wanted to. Once again, I don't know if they will. I'm less worried about him leaving, because if you kind of follow his trajectory, just reading between the lines a little bit, every place he's went, it seems like there's a good and a bad. Obviously, the good thing is he's kind of keeps transferring down as if he's trying to find that workhorse role. The bad part is he's not finding it anywhere. So now, is that indicative of his ability to play and perform at the level he's transferring to, or is that just there's somebody there that's better? And I'm going to lean on, I'm going to at least expect him to be able to be that workhorse role. Whether they give it to him or not is another story from a system perspective. But I'm optimistic. I'm pretty, I wouldn't say I'm high on him. My rankings haven't really reflected much of a move yet with him, but I still kind of have to figure out where I want him to be in relation to some of the other guys I have on the board. But I do like it. I do think it's a good move for him, and obviously for De Rose. But
I'll get to De Rose here in a second. But where do you have Amos on your rankings? I know you said he's still kind of ranked as if he was still at Memphis, but
I have him ranked at 63 right now.
okay. So we'll just go with the vibes here. We'll go full Gen Z with this. Like, just vibes wise, are you feeling like that'll end up moving up, or end up feeling like that'll move down?
I mean, I think people will recognize the name, and that number. I think I'll be priced out at that. I think that his ranking will have to go up to match his ADP.
His ADP currently, according to my numbers, is RB 73. I definitely agree with you that'll probably move up over the next couple of months as people kind of start assuming that he's the RB1 there at Georgia State. But we'll talk about
which I had him at RB 72. So prior to this,
go. Greg DeRosier. Rosier. I can't speak today.
Yeah.
What does this mean for him?
It's a hard name.
To me, I bumped him up quite a bit. It kind of cleared out this backfield. I like Sutton Smith, but he's coming off of injury. DeRosier had himself a really nice end to the season, even with Anderson there. And so I've moved up DeRosier to, where do I have him? Where are you at? There you are. I've got him as RB 34, and I quite frankly, I have room to move him up in my mind. Like I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure I'm done moving him up. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've got him. I moved him up to 37 right now is where I'm at. But I looking at some of the guys that are around him. When we have a little more clear picture of some of these backfields, he definitely would probably be moving up since his is a little more of a solidified position. So,
Alrighty. Next one up here, Damian Taylor, former Troy running back, former 1,000-yard back at Troy last year, transferring out during the spring portal, headed to Ole Miss. I hate this so much. This is really one of those G5 to Power 4 transfers where I think Taylor could end up being the RB1 for Ole Miss, or he could end up being the RB4 and really anywhere in between, right? And my perspective on this is that I'm not entirely even sure that that's up to Damian Taylor, right? I don't think he controls his own destiny, right? The wild cards are Kewan Lacey, Logan Diggs, and Shakai Mills-Knight, right? They're the ones that have a much wider range in terms of their outcome, right? Logan Diggs, obviously, in terms of like what he looks like post ACL injury and stuff like that. Does he recover well? Great. If that's the case, he's probably RB1 ahead of Taylor. If he's, dust, if he's, washed up and everything, then obviously Taylor will probably be a better option than him. Kewan Lacey, right? We like the talent, but he didn't get on the field much last year at Missouri. He was brought into Ole Miss. The reports have been good so far, but if he was so good, why did they bring in Damian Taylor, right? And then Shakai Mills-Knight is a very talented true freshman coming in, a guy that I thought could potentially be RB2 for Ole Miss this year behind Kewan Lacey. If, Logan Diggs didn't turn out super well, right? Meanwhile, Taylor, I think, is a very known commodity. I think we know what his peak is, and it's just a matter of can these other guys overtake that peak, I guess, if that makes any sense. If those other guys will surpass him. So how are you reading this, Eliot?
right. I mean, it's a bummer. Obviously, I wish he wouldn't have left Troy because I would have definitely had more shares of him if he didn't. I'm not huge on any Ole Miss running back, to be honest with you, outside of Judkins. A few years ago, I haven't been super impressed with anybody they put on the field, and they don't seem to have anyone on the field for very long. Lacey's, once again, like you said, good reports, but I've just not been very high on him. Having said all that, in my rankings, I'm kind of cheating again with those two guys, but Kewan Lacey and Damian Taylor are both ranked right now as 56th and 57th. I think that's probably too generous on both of them. Having said that, that's probably where I would have, if we knew who was going to get the nod, that's probably where I would have them ranked, assuming that we get some more data and more info on it down the road. But I'll probably stay away from it from in most of my best balls at this point, just because once again, I'm probably going to get priced out. So
I find it so funny just how much we think alike. Because I have Lacey as RB 54, and I have Damian Taylor as 60, and I kind of am in the same boat where I'm like, I'll probably keep Lacey there because I really do like Lacey and his talent, but Taylor absolutely has the opportunity to move down. Depending on what kind of reports, though. I will say I'm trying to remember what was the dude's name? Nate Kiffin was head coach at FAU, the running back. Oh my goodness, a Singletary, Devin Singletary.
Yeah.
So it's not like because you were saying that like Judkins is the only guy they've really put out. I'm like, well, no. Back when Lane Kiffin was at FAU, they had Devin Singletary. So like when they have their guy, they have their guy. The problem is, it seems like they're actively trying to make it to where this backfield has multiple guys, right? Last guy we can touch on this page is the guy that supposedly, apparently, could be replacing Damian Taylor there at Troy, and that is former CFF favorite Travion Cooley, headed from Georgia Tech over to Troy, formerly of Louisville before that. I remember back in the early days of me doing CTN, the hype train that was built around Travion Cooley. Eliot, do we think we finally see him emerge this year? Between Taylor and Green, Troy's losing 283 attempts, 1,500 yards in production. There's not much in terms of what's there to replace him, right? They got Jordan Lovett. He was unimpressive last year, barely over 3 yards a carry. They bring back Jamontez Woods, who's somehow still eligible. How are you feeling about Travion Cooley? Are you planning on ranking him? Does it even matter with Troy?
The short answer, yes. He ranked at some point. I don't have him ranked yet. Having said that, in one of my latest basketball drafts, I did take him. I think I took him in the 22nd round. So right now, I have him kind of pegged as a very good value pick. I haven't seen really. I don't think I've had anybody in any of the drafts I've been in. He's only been taken once, and that was the one that I just took him in. So obviously, I'm optimistic. He was a fairly high prospect. I think he was like at a 94 rating for 24/7. He's the right build. He's like 5'10", 210, something like that. I think he's got like a 4.5 40. Like he's got speed. He's got all the kind of intangibles. It's just a matter of whether or not he gets put into the right position and succeeds. But I'm optimistic. Like I said, I'm looking at him right now as a value pickup, and I'll probably grab him if no one else does in the last several rounds of every draft. But we'll see. You never know. But yeah, I expect him to get the start. I expect him to be the lead guy going in there based on what I see out there as far as a returning production.
I think he'll certainly be moving up drafts because I'm looking at my latest best ball, and he was taken at round 25, pick 7. And I'm fairly certain, if I remember correctly, that was like right after the announcement was made that he was transferring there. So clearly people are excited about this transfer. They're probably going to be more aggressive on him in upcoming drafts. It's just a matter of how high does that price get, right?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to our second round of running backs here. We'll start with TJ Harden. Finally finding a home here after he entered the portal back in December. And I was concerned that given the fact that he didn't find a home, that he was going to end up being one of these guys that just skipped going to the G5 and would just go down to the FCS here. But seems like he has found himself a home here with the SMU Mustangs. Last year, we finally got that SMU workhorse back we've kind of been waiting on with Brashard Smith there. He's RB13 on the year, wide receiver 3 on the year. But the obvious candidate to kind of replace Smith was LJ Johnson, and he ended up transferring out. So there wasn't really a ton of great options. I know Chris Johnson came over from Miami, still kind of had that connection there. I believe from when Brett Lashley was working there, still had some of those staff connections over there. But outside of him, this was really a wide open running back room. Harden's coming in. I think he was smart to kind of sit back and wait and choose his landing spot to kind of see what spots kind of opened here in the spring. I think he's got a great opportunity here. I've been a big fan of TJ Harden since his freshman year. So I'm optimistic about this. I haven't fully ranked him yet, so I don't know exactly where he's going to end up in my rankings yet. Eliot, what about you, man? How are you feeling about this transfer, and do you have him ranked yet?
I don't have him ranked. Once again, he went off in the latest draft that I did, though, and in the end of the 16th round, and it was I remember it was a pick or two before I had planned on taking him. So um, I'm very happy with that move. He's somebody that back when he was at UCLA, like I had a ton of shares of Carson Steele, and unfortunately, when he transferred to UCLA, that kind of those two kind of cannibalized each other a little bit there. Um, but it wasn't because I didn't like him. It's just because I had more shares of Steele. But he's moving to SMU. I see a lot of green light for him, and think that he has some room for success, and I expect. I mean, he'll definitely be ranked. I don't have him ranked yet, but he'll definitely be ranked, and I expect him to go off in pretty much every draft this point forward because of it.
I mean, I'm looking at one of the drafts that I'm in right now that's like relatively right or relatively early. It's right around the middle of the draft right now. Let's see, around 12 or 13 right now, and I'm like looking at Harden and considering taking him here in the next couple of picks that I have. So imagine he'll definitely be decently high up my rankings, probably finishing around, I'd say, anywhere from RB50 to RB70. I know that's a huge range, but that's all I can give you guys right now.
Well, just be careful. You and I are both in Ethan's second draft, so we better. I think
I
he's
thought,
already gone though in that one.
I would say I'm fairly certain he's already gone. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of guys going to empty running back rooms, let's talk about the guy that's probably going to replace TJ Harden at UCLA, and that's Javion Thomas, right? We were discussing earlier about how Ott transferred out of Cal. These two were not the only ones. Basically, every guy out of Cal transferred out. And Thomas looked like he might have been the guy at Cal, and then the very next day he announces, yeah, I'm out too. Javion Thomas is an interesting guy, though, right? Because he's a guy that I know somebody like Eric Froton especially loves Javion Thomas. And quite frankly, when you look at the stats, it's hard to not see why somebody wouldn't fall in love with Javion Thomas, right? Especially over Ott, right? Thomas beat out Ott in yards per carry, 6.6 versus 2.9. Touchdowns last year, 7 versus 5. Breakaway percentage, Thomas was north of 50%. Meanwhile, Ott was only at 42.2%. He beat out Ott in yards after contact per attempt. Like he was kicking Ott's butt in every category, right? Now Ott goes to Oklahoma. Thomas is going here to UCLA in a running back room, in my opinion, where there's just no competition, literally none, zilch. Like Anthony Freyas is the only or the only other running back here that got production last year, right? I personally wouldn't be surprised if UCLA tried to add another running back on top of Thomas, but is Thomas just a workhorse back here by default, Eliot? How are you reading this?
I mean, I think I mean, you're correct. So, like, I know Froton's big on him in my home league that I've run for a long time. Matt Klein, a guy in my league, has been hoarding him. It's a keeper league, so he's been kind of hoarding him for the last year or two, regrettably. But one of those things where his advanced metrics are really, really good. He shows all the signs of being a really, really high end fantasy potential running back. And I think UCLA is as good as any just from getting the opportunity to play. I want to see what UCLA does offensively. Obviously, with Nico coming in and just being in the Big Ten and their performance last year in general, I want to see kind of what year two looks like under that coaching staff. But I do think that running back has to be a big part of it. So I expect him to be obviously drafted every step of the way from here on out, but I also expect him to be drafted reasonably high. I'm not exactly sure where I will rank him yet. Let's see here.
I could see myself ranking him at least in my top 40 because again, like I mentioned, it's just workhorse back by default right now. There's no other real competition. There's another guy here we'll discuss at the end of this quad of 5 guys here that I think could be another candidate that UCLA could go after. But as of right now, I just got to play the cards that are in front of me. And as of now, that makes Thomas easily, in my opinion, a top 40 back.
Yeah, actually, I do have him ranked right now, but I have him ranked at 59. And I think I made that move once Ott left, but before he did. So I expect him to be higher than that.
Nice. The only oh my gosh, try again, Jared. The only other reservation I might have is that Sinceri does come from Kirk Cignetti's system, and Kirk Cignetti has been employing a committee type approach at the
Did he?
running back position the last couple of years, right? But as I mentioned, as I keep harping on here, there's literally nobody else in this backfield as far as I'm concerned. Like even like Jalen Berger, he's gone, right? Like all these guys that have been clogging up the UCLA backfield the last couple of years are all gone. So it's like by default. Um, Another running back here. This one just makes me throw up a little bit because we've been waiting so long for this man to find himself a home, and he happened to choose, in my opinion, the one of the worst landing spots you could have possibly hoped for, and that is Harrison Whaley, the former running back out of Wyoming, transferring out of there, and he lands in Virginia. This is already a coaching staff that I'm not a huge fan of. I don't trust their running game hardly at all. I was maybe kind of interested in Jamori Taylor kind of coming up, but they now bring in Harrison Whaley. They bring in Isaiah Augustave from Colorado there. It's pretty clear this is going to be a committee-centric backfield for Virginia. Harrison Whaley, in my opinion, is making a huge mistake leaving Wyoming behind, and this is the place where he's going to go to quote unquote, get that NIL paycheck and spend his final year of eligibility. I don't get it. What about you, Elliot?
Yeah, I mean, I had some shares of him in some keeper leagues, and unfortunately, I might as well just flush him at this point because I agree. I mean, Wyoming was such a perfect place for him. You knew he was going to be the guy. You knew what kind of offense they're going to run, and you know the competition they're playing against, and what to expect there. And now you might still know, but it's not good. It's a bummer from a fantasy perspective, but from a personal level, I'm sure it was the right move for him. So wish him the best, but unfortunately, it's gonna be a no for me, dog.
Yeah, it's absolutely not. Again, very similar to Damian Taylor a little bit, right? Where it's like, could he end up being the RB1 for Virginia? Sure. But between his injury and, him moving up in a level in competition here, he could end up being the RB4 as well. So I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Kendrick Raphael, the former NC State running back, is headed to Cal, where, as we mentioned before, everybody cleared out. The entire running back room is just gone, right? So Cal had to bring in some pieces. Raphael is not the only one they've already brought in. They brought in Brandon High out of UTSA. Both of these guys were successful in their last stops, but not workhorse guys by any means. Raphael, about 425 yards, 5.4 yards per carry. Brandon High was just shy of 500 yards at UTSA, 5.3 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns on his end. So both these guys are kind of being brought in. So I guess we can talk about this with regards to both of them here. Elliot, how are you dealing with Raphael and High here at Cal? This is an empty running back room. These guys both should get plenty of run here. I have to imagine Cal's probably not done bringing in running backs, considering, like I said, the entire room's just gone. How are you reading this?
Yeah, I mean, they have one scholarship back returning, so they don't really have much of a choice but to bring more guys in, unless they want to risk basically having to play a wide receiver at running back at some point during the year, because injuries happen. I expect both these guys to see the field. I'm not sure either of them are going to be fantasy relevant. I could be wrong there, but I see this being as more of a committee approach. But they're effectively in a full rebuild now, just based on what they went through offensively speaking. And I think probably neither of those guys are guys that I was really high on to begin with. Either High or Raphael. He was kind of, I think, the number 2 back behind Jordan Waters last year at NC State, but Smothers came in and kind of pushed him to the side, which tells me that if he can do that at NC State, moving to Cal, once again, not a transfer up in competition, but what leads me to believe that he's ready to take on a workhorse role in a comparable program strength wise. So I'm not excited about either. Is the short answer.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a room that I'm curious to see how over the next couple of weeks. And again, there's a lot of guys that are still like running backs, especially that are still looking for a home. So I'm sure Cal will be all over that. It is funny. I'm looking at the CFB winning edge returning production database, and whenever there's a transfer player, he highlights them in green. The
Yeah,
whole sheet's green.
the whole
Like
thing. Yeah,
like that we call
a
that
lot of green.
the Brian Harsin effect. Um, Last running back we'll discuss here. This is a guy that hasn't found a home. I've been trying to keep mostly two guys that have found a destination because those are easier to talk about in terms of fantasy impact. But there are a lot of you out there that would like us to kind of discuss Gavin Sawchuk transferring out of Oklahoma, right? I personally feel like this screams UCLA, right? I think this is another guy that UCLA could end up going after. Again, it's a blue chip prospect there. If I remember correctly, isn't Sawchuk from California? I'd have to double check. Let's see. Gavin Sawchuk, 4.7. Might be talking out of my butt completely. He's from Colorado, so not too far. Not too far. I wasn't super off base. It definitely was still a shot in the dark there. What about you, Eliot? Is there any other running back rooms that you kind of think, like off the top of your head, strike you as a place that Sawchuk could end up?
I mean, I think there's quite a few places he could go. But I think his best move would probably be to drop down in competition. He's gonna. What's his eligibility? He doesn't have much. He has quite a bit left, I think, because he hasn't really played much.
I can
You know
look
what
at
his
his.
eligibility is? Like three
I
left.
I think he's got 2 left. That sounds right. Let me look it up while
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't leave him a whole lot of room. I mean, he could drop down and then with the hopes of dropping back up. But with NIL in its current state, I have a feeling that that's not going to happen because somebody's going to throw money at him and he's going to go somewhere where he, hopefully is relevant. But yeah, I don't really know. Haven't really thought about him in general since he had left or where he would go. But depending on where he goes, he has the potential to be a fantasy asset. Let's put it that way.
No, he's got a very nice skill set all around, right? He can receive out of the backfield pretty well. He's built up a lot of muscle during his time there at Oklahoma, so he very much can be built to be a workhorse back if he finds the right location. Just hasn't worked out. By the way, I did look it up. He redshirted 2022, played 2023, 2024, so he's got 2 years of eligibility left.
2 years, yeah. I was gonna say he's up to 200 pounds, which I know that's the first time that he's been kind of over that 200-pound mark. From a size wise, I think he's pretty much perfect. I really don't know what his speed looks like, but he's originally from Louisiana and then ended up going to high school in Colorado. But so we'll see. Maybe Wyoming.
That would be awesome. He's totally going to end up at Colorado, isn't he? Let's move on to wide receivers. So, in the wide receivers is probably one of the biggest transfers here outside of Nico Yamaliava with Emmett Mosley, the Stanford wide receiver, going in like round 2, 3 of drafts, transferring out after Troy Taylor has been fired there. I was kind of hoping Frank Reich would be able to keep him around, but NIL calls, and that NIL calls him to Texas, where, in my opinion, I know some people are really excited about this. I know some people are really like, oh, like the upgrade in quarterback here is so insane. Like, yeah, he's going to go play for Arch Manning. That is very nice. But I still think this is a pretty big hit in his stock, right? I have him going from wide receiver 17 down to wide receiver 63. Because in my projections, I had him at 110 targets at Stanford. At Texas, I'm projecting him for 90 targets, which is still good. Don't get me wrong. That's the 12-game pace that Matthew Golden was on to finish last year. Problem is, though, my projection is kind of holding him back because last year Mosley only averaged 10 yards a catch. If I base it solely off of Texas's top wide receiver has done over the last 2 years, my projections would still put him back up into the wide receiver 50-ish range, but it really is the downgrades coming from the fact that he's not going to be that guy at Texas. Now, he might still be wide receiver 1, but he's not going to be the guy that has a ceiling of 120 targets. Like, you're talking a ceiling of maybe 100 targets. Still a good pick, don't get me wrong. But, like I said, very much a hit here. He gets the QB upgrade, but major downgrade in target share, major downgrade in level of competition. He's already dropped from the 2nd round to the 4th, 5th round. I still think he's too much at the 4th, 5th round. What about you, Eliot? How are you feeling about this?
I mean, similar, probably not as harsh on him as you are. I did move him up a little bit, but I was not super high on him to begin with. I just didn't feel like Stanford. It's tricky with wide receivers because you still, I mean, even yes, system matters, yes, talent matters, but you still have to have a counterpart to throw it to you. And I think that's where I think most people are getting excited, is that you've got a quarterback in Arch Manning that they expect to get the ball to him. The question, and you brought it up already, and my biggest hesitation of moving him up any further than I have him, which right now I have him ranked 35th wide receiver, but is that target share. How much of the passes that they're going to distribute are going to go to him? I think it's great for him, from a being on a team that's going to perform better, being in a position that he's bringing in more NIL product, but I think that from a fantasy perspective, it might be about a net neutral change, if not a little net positive. But I think that you should still see him drop in drafts. I mean, he was going in, like, I saw him in early drafts, he was going in the 2nd round at times, which was absurd to me. And even in the Champion Series, he went from 14th pick to 20th pick, and then in the 3rd one dropped all the way to the 115th. And that was me, because that happened to be when he transferred out of Stanford and had yet committed to Texas. He just slid down far enough that I was like, I mean, it's worth a dart throw. So, or at least I believe that's the draft where I pulled that off. And
was
it
that
might
right
have been
around the time? Was that right around the time the rumors were talking about him visiting Vanderbilt in Virginia? And so everybody was like, I don't want to touch that.
Yeah, so, well, I think that was the draft I picked him up in. I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, I mean, he got picked off at the kind of mid to end part of the 9th round, which, I think there's value there.
All right, let's move on to our next wide receiver here, and that is probably one of the bigger casualties of this spring portal window, and that is Trebor Pena going from Syracuse to Penn State. Man, this just makes me want to cry. It was even more painful, right? Because not only did we get Syracuse, we don't get Syracuse Pena anymore, but we were initially talking about him when he initially entered the portal, about him going to Miami. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, that would have salvaged everything. It might have even been an improvement for Pena going to the system that just gave us, Xavier Restrepo being a top 10 wide receiver. But now he ends up here at Penn State, which has struggled to create any kind of wide receiver production, really since the days of Jahan Dotson. It's just been an absolute mess there. The only saving grace that I can see here is that Pena is, just good enough to where Penn State's just forced to force feed him, right? Because the rest of the receiver room just isn't all that. I mean, their best options right now, who else did they bring out? I know they brought Devontae Ross in, and his, incredible frame of 5'11", 160 pounds. That's totally going to hold up in the Big Ten. And then, oh my God, I can't remember who else they brought in, but they're not super impressive. And so I do think Pena could have the potential to just be that guy that Aller is going to constantly be looking for on every play, especially if none of the other tight ends step up. But I don't want to trust it. I don't want to trust anything Penn State's putting out in this passing game outside of tight ends. What about you, Eliot?
Yeah, this one was a big one for me because I had quite a few shares of him in the early best balls. I think I had him in 1, 2, 3, 4 of my earlier best balls. I know you got him in this last one, but
Yeah, that one hurt.
yeah, it hit me pretty hard. And it's unfortunate because yeah, that's Penn State's where receivers go to die. We talked about it last time on the show, and I, I I mean I'll probably have him ranked, but as far as I'm concerned, he's no longer a part of the bacon fueled sphere, so he's out.
He's done. We're not doing it anymore. Yeah, I think I'll still probably keep him ranked. Again, I'll see kind of where my projections end up with him and everything. But like, because yeah, he still has a saving grace of he could literally just become the only option in that receiver that could help him out a lot. But I don't want to bet on that. Next guy here.
And I do need to. Oh, sorry. I do need to amend my statement. Josh Chevalier actually took him in the 10th round, so it was a different draft that I grabbed him in, one of Carp's drafts. So
Okay.
with Emmett Mosley, so he's the one who got the good value, not me.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, we always got to give Josh his proper credit. The dude is smart. Next guy here that we're going to talk about, in my opinion, might be the most impactful transfer in this spring portal window in terms of a positive impact for CFF. And that's Mark Hamper, the former Wisconsin, but more importantly, former Idaho wide receiver, heading over to New Mexico. I can already hear some of you like having big question marks above your head right now, because if y'all listened last week, I literally said, I'm writing off New Mexico. I don't want anything to do with that team. If their offense is struggling against that terrible defense in their spring game, there's nothing on this planet that could possibly make me want any of these players. That is until Mark Hamper reunites with Jason Eck here, coming after a brief stint at Wisconsin where I think Mark Hamper realized he was in over his head, moving up to the Power 4 that quickly. He's coming back to Jason Eck, and we've discussed before that Jason Eck's system at Idaho put together some real kick-ass seasons for his top wide receiver. If you extrapolate it to 12 games, in 2024, you're looking at 115 targets, 68 catches, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. In 2023, 120 targets, 85 catches, 1,140 yards, and 8 touchdowns. 2022, 118 targets, 90 catches, 1,321 yards, and 17 touchdowns. That's consistency that you can't hardly find anywhere. So if I can get the top wide receiver in this system, I'm willing to take a shot on it, right? And I do think that's where we're heading with Mark Hamper, right? I love this system, but like so far this offseason, again, problems started to emerge. I mentioned it last week. The offense looked like it was struggling against a terrible defense in the spring game. Jack Lane's injured. Keegan Johnson, the guy that I initially kind of pegged as the potential wide receiver 1 for this offense, he did not seem to be emerging at all. And so I'm like, okay, there's just nobody here that I really want. I think Mark Hamper coming back to this system is exactly what the doctor ordered here, right? Wide receiver is very familiar with this system. He was wide receiver 2 for Idaho last season, 87 targets, 49 receptions, 963 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaging almost 20 yards per catch. He should be able to slide right into this, and I think he'll give the offense a little bit of the juice that it needs. And I'm kind of scared because I started doing projections for him, and my projections for him are pretty insane, given, again, based on what we've seen out of this Jason Eck system over the last several years at Idaho. I'm scared to rank him as high as he should be based on these projections. So that's my thoughts on Mark Hamper. I'm hyped about this. I could hear Chris K already writing the pump and dump article for Mark Hamper based on the way I'm talking about this right now. Eliot, pour some cold water on me, man. Like I'm hyped about this transfer. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's once again. I think you're right, and you're thinking that it's a definite positive for New Mexico. I think it's he's a talent that they clearly need. But I still lean on once again you got to have somebody throwing it to him, and right now they kind of look like a dumpster fire, offensively speaking, but if they can put it together, and X one of those guys where he should be able to make something out of it at least, throughout the summer, he'll definitely be utilized. I mean, he's a big body guy. I don't know a ton about him, but I know he's like 6'2", 6'3". He's 210 ish. Fairly good route runner, good hands. Doesn't shy from contact. Like you said, he averages almost 20 yards per catch, or at least did last year. I'm sure he can handle the volume. It's just a matter of whether there's going to be any volume to be had. So I'm not going to pour cold water. It'll just be lukewarm water on you.
I still end up wet. So, what about these two receivers headed over here to Oklahoma State? Right, we got Christian Fitzpatrick, the former Marshall wide receiver who got a waiver to get one last year of eligibility, and it looks like he is going to spend that by moving up to the Big 12 here. In my opinion, he fits really well what Mike Gundy's wanted on those outside wide receivers. Tall guy, he's averaging almost 18 yards per catch on the outside for Marshall last year, right? But then we also bring in Terrell Davis here from Central Oklahoma. It's a Division II transfer, granted, right? But he was phenomenal for Central Oklahoma last year. 101 receptions in 12 games, 1,485 yards, 14 touchdowns. Obviously a huge jump, but with the rumors of, Talon Setron going down due to injury, and it sounds like the rumors are saying that it might be ACL related, there's a wide open race for that outside position here at Oklahoma State, and I think both of these guys could be very interesting. What about you, Eliot? How are you viewing this outside Oklahoma wide receiver or Oklahoma State wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think this is a position that we all have to be kind of have our ears perked up for, because this is one that we want. They've got a ton of turnover at the wide receiver position there, so I think both of these guys fit the bill from an offensive scheme perspective. They both have the capability. I think I'm a little more interested in Fitzpatrick than Davis, but it's by a small margin, and enough so that I'll probably throw darts on either of them. But at the same time, I'm paying attention to it for sure.
All right, let's keep it a move on because we're running out of time here. And we got to talk about spring games still. So it's like we got a lot to talk about here. So we'll go through this relatively quickly because I think most of these wide receivers here at the end there's a lot less known about them. Micah Hudson, I got a question mark versus the Texas Tech, but I actually just got the notification that he is officially moving back to Texas Tech. My quick thoughts on him, even if he goes back to, or now that I know he's going back to Texas Tech, I'm still not even sure if he's worth grabbing. He's now missed a whole spring, right? There's kind of some bad blood there. Starting wide receivers seem pretty set in stone with, Caleb Douglas, Coy Eakin, Reggie Virgil, right? Obviously, Hudson can kind of get out there when it comes to, the likes of, 4 wide receiver sets and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like that'll be, like, he'll go back to Texas Tech and he'll be overdrafted, and I'm probably not going to have any of him. What do you think, Eliot?
Yeah, I probably won't have any either. I don't know what he's going to do next. That's the bottom line. He kind of is obviously wishy-washy on what he's looking for, and I'm a big fan of Coy Eakin, so he's one of the guys that I've targeted both last year and this year a fair amount. And when I heard he was kind of confirmed or suspected to go back, I was a little bummed about that, but I hope it doesn't affect things too much. I'm not going to be investing any capital in him without without a little more known in front of me.
What about Keelan Marion here, going from BYU to Miami of Florida? Decently productive last year, 41 targets, 24 receptions, 364 yards, and a touchdown. A balanced guy, about 2/3 of the time he's out wide, 1/3 of the time he's inside there. We all kind of knew that Miami was looking to add a wide receiver out of the portal this spring window. Obviously, they were trying very hard with Trevor Pena. Lost out on that one. Marion comes in. How is this kind of affecting how you're drafting this Miami wide receiver room? I think last time you were on here, we were discussing what we were doing with CJ Daniels and like how high he should be going. How do you break this wide receiver room down now for CFF with the addition of Marion and them not really seeming like they're going to add anybody else?
I don't know. It doesn't change my opinion of the wide receiver room much, which before was still a little bit uncertain to begin with. So I still think that, CJ Daniels and JoJo Trader are probably the two guys that if you're going to target right now, they're the ones you want to target. Um, but um, honestly, the guy in the kind of receiving core here that I'm targeting the most is Lofton at tight end. So
Fair point.
I can't say that I'm really heavily invested in any of the Miami wide receivers. But so yeah, it doesn't change much. His coming in doesn't change much, and quite frankly, it's a little bit surprising that they weren't able to get somebody. I don't want to say better. That's not fair to him, but effectively better with their program and with the money they've been throwing around the last couple of years. I would have thought they'd have been able to bring somebody else in, but just wasn't to be, I guess.
Yeah, they whiffed on Mosley, they whiffed on Pena there. I think Miami messed up. What about these two guys going to Louisville here, another ACC school here, with Trayshawn Hurry, the former wide receiver out of San Jose State, headed there, and then Dakari Collins, formerly of NC State and Clemson, also heading there. Both of these guys have been outside wide receivers. Hurry averaging almost 17 yards per catch for San Jose State, obviously moving up in competition a bit here. Do either of these guys coming into this wide receiver room make you worry about Chris Bell or Colin Lacey moving forward? Or do you think this is Louisville kind of adding some depth pieces? Because, quite frankly, behind Bell and Lacey, they didn't really have much.
No, it's totally just depth. I'm not worried about those two guys losing their roles at all. Um, and if anything, I mean, it's just a net negative for the guys who were, drafting Hurry. Which I don't think that he was being drafted heavily early in the year. I think it was mostly the last 5 or 6 weeks that he's been getting some talk about him, that people were starting to take notice and put his name down. But so I don't think it hurt too many people, but from a fantasy perspective, those who did draft Hurry, it is kind of a pretty big net loss from my perspective. But no, as far as the Louisville wide receiver room, it doesn't change a thing for me.
Yeah, and there is obviously precedent of Jeff Brom taking transfer wide receivers and turning them into his top guy, right? I mean, Charlie Jones, Corey Brooks just this past year, Jamari Thrash, even a G5 to P4 guy coming in and being wide receiver one. But they all have one thing in common, right? And that's they were there during the spring, right? And so I do think that these guys are kind of behind the eight ball. If you're expecting them to be the wide receiver one for Louisville, they probably would have come in during the spring, I would think. Last guy here, Zacharias Williams, the former, quote, wide receiver one for Utah, entered the portal very soon after the spring game and is now headed to USC, where, in my opinion, he's going to be at best wide receiver 3. I'm just going to air my grievances against Mr. Zacharias here. Dang it, Zacharias. Every freaking paranoid coach in the country is now going to use you as the poster child as to why programs shouldn't host spring games. And again, for what? So you could go from being wide receiver 1 at Utah to wide receiver 3 at best at USC. Utah's probably going to win more games this year than USC. I don't get this. Like, again, this just drove me nuts. Like, and it is such poor sportsmanship from like a guy like Lincoln Riley as well. Like, Lincoln Riley did not know who Zacharias Williams' name was until that spring game came around, and he's like, "Oh, that guy looks pretty good. Let's just go tamper him and grab him." Like, this is the kind of crap that just ticks me off. Rant over. That's it, Eliot. I think this kills any kind of hope for Williams potentially being a CFF relevant guy this year, if anybody was even drafting him. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a bummer as far as just anybody drafting him. I actually had him queued up in one of my drafts, and after he transferred out, I removed him from said queue. But so I got lucky there, dodging a bullet, because I agree. His value is basically non-existent now from a fantasy redraft perspective.
All right, let's touch on these tight ends, and then we'll run through the spring games here real quick. Tight ends, honestly, pretty impactful here in the spring portal. And by impactful, I mean all the guys that I've been drafting seem to not like their destinations anymore and move on. But some for better, some for worse, right? Jack Endries moving from Cal to Texas. Texas has given us a top 12 tight end in CFF in 2 of the last 3 years. Endries is a tight end 22 last year at Cal. This seems kind of like a match made in heaven for me. Lance Mason transferring out of Missouri State, headed to Wisconsin. This broke my heart because I was really excited about Lance Mason at Missouri State, but we talked about him too much, and I guess programs started noticing.
Sorry, Mox.
Yeah. Sorry, Mox. Sorry, me. I think I've been drafting him more than Mox, honestly. But I don't think all is lost here, right? Because Luke Fickell gave us Josh Wiley back at Cincinnati. Jeff Grimes has actually got a better history with tight end that I give him credit for. Drake Dabney in 2023, Isaac Rex in 2020, Matt Bushman in 2019. That could end up working out potentially there at Wisconsin. Problem is I don't trust any of the quarterbacks. And then Tanner Koziel going from Ball State, went to Wisconsin for a semester, and is now transferring to Houston. Koziel, what are you doing, man? I don't know what this is. What are your thoughts, Eliot, on these 3 guys?
Yeah, so I had tons of shares of Koziel last year and the year before, and it paid off big time. And I haven't drafted him once since he went to Wisconsin, and I have drafted him once just out of value. I think it was my tight end 3 at Houston, and I felt like that was a good tight end 3, but in one of my later drafts. But definitely a bummer with him. I agree. Lance Mason might be a slight net negative, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm not entirely enthusiastic about Wisconsin football under Fickell. I feel like they've been disorganized and unproductive across the board. The days of knowing what you're going to get from their program, offensively speaking, seems to be gone. And I'm not really willing to invest anything super heavily there. And then with injuries, I mean, I think for him, obviously great. I think this is a huge move for him. I think it's probably a net positive as well from a fantasy perspective. But I think the individual who probably benefits the most from these transfers is Arch Manning. I mean, he's got one of the best tight ends in the country, 3 of the better wide receivers in the country. They've got a stable of running backs that are all fully capable. This offense is full speed ahead right now, and I think he's probably the one that benefited the most. I probably was a little bit lower on Arch than most of everybody else's rankings. I think I had him outside my top 10 for a while, but he just keeps getting bumped up, and the portal is obviously the reason why.
I got him as QB 12. I'm holding firm on that.
Stick to your guns.
I'm sticking to my guns on that one. But no, you're 100% right. Like he's got all the pieces he needs, and that's why I still have him as a top 12 quarterback compared to like if it was Quinn Ewers, I'd have him as like QB 60. Right. All right. That's enough of the transfer portal. A lot of talk on that. Went a little long on that, so we're going to run through these spring games here real quick. I'll try to give as many takeaways here as possible. Maryland. Pretty much the main takeaway here is that it looks like that true freshman Malik Washington is going to be your starter. Right? There's some talk still about him and Martin still kind of going back and forth, and Loxley's like, I'm not going to make a commitment here today. Washington went 12 of 18 for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. Martin went 6 of 14 for 69 yards and a touchdown. I think it's pretty clear, like both with the first team, I think it's pretty clear who's outperforming the other right now. We didn't really get a lot on the wide receiver or the running backs, considering that Nolan Ray and Jaleel Farouk did not play. I will say it is very concerning to me that awards were handed out here after the spring, and Octavian Smith, not Jaleel Farouk, won the JoJo Walker Wide Receiver Award. So I know, Eliot, you and I are big fans of Jaleel Farouk here, but maybe him being injured here towards the end is kind of hurting his potential of being the wide receiver 1 here. Not entirely sure. 2 names to kind of watch out for that that kind of stood out here was Mekhi White. He played with the second team, but 4 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Seems like he's doing pretty well. And then Ryan Manning, who I do believe was playing with the first team, 5 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. definitely, I think, some room for some potential breakouts here. What do you think, Eliot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised about the Malik Washington numbers, or the Justin Martin numbers for that matter. I kind of suspected that that might be the case. That Martin is kind of the presumed starter, but I think Washington is kind of slowly outperforming him and pushing him to the side. I'm not as worried about Farouk. I think the awards, Octavian Smith's been there. Um, I think that him being out is definitely not good. Is not a positive thing, but I do think that we see that this team can support two wide receivers, and if those are the top two wide receivers, which I believe they will be, Octavian Smith and Jaleel Farouk, I'm confident that Farouk is the better athlete there and should perform better, but it is making me pause a little bit. I've probably dropped him down a little bit from where I was drafting him, therefore not getting quite as many shares as I was earlier in the year, which was in effectively every draft I was in. So,
Except for the ones that I was in, which you would
I got him in some. I got some mutual some in the ones we were both in. So,
hold on, can we talk about your hiking of the price of Dylan Carson? Man, you weren't kidding when you were
yeah,
like, you weren't kidding in that last show we were talking about where you're like, yeah, I guess I'll have to move him or draft him even higher. And well, you have, sir. You got him, started taking him in the third round. I'm like, oh my god, I don't even know if I
yep,
can do that. And
yep,
like,
I
yeah,
haven't, and which is a bummer too because I shout out to the G5 Hive. I watched the Air Force one, and they're talking about how him and can't remember the other back's name. Frew, I think, is his last name.
oh yeah, Frew,
Um,
Christian Frew,
but
Christopher Frew.
kind of sharing the load, etc. And I'm like, no, we're not sharing. We're not sharing the load here. We're gonna all just keep handing it off to Carson.
Yeah, Carson's the better back for sure.
But yeah,
All right. Move on here. Oregon had their spring game this past week. Again, for those that care, Dante Moore went 12 for 20, 140 yards. He had an interception on the final play of the game where he just kind of yeeted it down the field. I wouldn't take anything away from that. Had himself a pretty all right day. The other main takeaway I had was that the Kenyon Sadiq hype will not be slowing down. Sadiq finished this game with 7 receptions for 102 yards. Sadiq's already gotten as high as tight end 2. Some people have him as tight end 1. This is not going to slow it down whatsoever. What are your thoughts on Kenyon Sadiq, Eliot? Like, I kind of get where people are coming from on him, but I think he's also I think he is not a victim, but he is a product of a year where there's not a lot really known at tight end, and so people really like to just target, hey, let's look at the uber athletic guy playing tight end.
yeah. I mean, so I have him ranked fourth in my tight end rankings. I think that's a pretty fair ranking. I think that he is absolutely a specimen from an athletic perspective, and I think what he has going for him is Oregon is probably not in the same position they have been in the past from a wide receiver perspective. And because of his athleticism, he just becomes another tool for Moore to kind of attack the defenses with. And I think that I probably have been underdrafting him, but part of that's just because there's some guys out there that they're taking him really early,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of tight ends that I like that I can get 2-3 in a row later in the draft and feel just as good. I think that in the underdog drafts, he will be going off as probably tight end 1, and if he's not. I'll be drafting him a fair bit, I think. But yeah, I mean, he was definitely showcased well during the spring game. That's one of the spring games I actually was paying attention to this weekend a little bit. And DeCorian Moore also had, I know he had a couple good long passes, and so he kind of showed what he can do a little bit. So yeah, I think Oregon's they're where we expect them to be right now at this point in the year, and hopeful that they can keep moving in that direction. But I don't think, like you said, Sadiq's not going to be slowing down. The hype train is going to be full speed ahead down the tracks for a while.
Nope. All we can hope is that he's not going to be Michael Trigg. Let's move on to our another spring game here, and that is the Memphis Tigers here. Not a ton of coverage out there, but shout out to Jonah Dillon from the Memphis Commercial Appeal, who published his article not once, not twice, but 3 times in 3 different publications. The exact same article published 3 times. But he gave us some really good information. Some great quarterback stats here. Brendan Lewis didn't play a ton, 5 for 6, 29 yards. Arrington Maiden, great day for him. 18 for 31, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Like, he was the star of the day. AJ Hill also played 10 for 18, 54 yards. But, like, Maiden was just on fire in this game. And I am praying to God Memphis does the right thing and eventually starts Maiden. I really don't think Brendan Lewis fits this offensive system super well. And I think Maiden was perfectly made for it. And I think he kind of showed it here in this spring game. We'll see. The staff has kind of talked about Lewis as being the starter already because of his experience. Like, he's started games before. And so I'm hoping they change their mind somewhere down the line, because I really like Maiden as a prospect. The other thing that kind of stood out to me was how well CJ Smith performed in this game, right? Tigers, good freaking lore between Rock Taylor, Demir Blankumsey, Kobe Drake, Mario Anderson, and Anthony Lamphere. I can't even count how many targets that is. We're approaching over 300 targets vacated from last year. They need somebody to step up, and it does seem like that CJ Smith, the former Purdue, former Georgia speedster wide receiver, seems to be stepping up. He finished the day with 6 catches for 102 yards, including a 60-yard touchdown he caught from Maiden. I'm willing to add CJ Smith into my rankings here. I haven't added him yet, but I definitely will be doing so sometime this week, given this news, because we know that Memphis is going to want to pass the ball quite a bit. They're part of that, what does Froton call it? It's like the 35 plus pass attempts per game. It's like a 35 something club. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Froton will yell at me later in terms of what it is, but they are one of these systems that is made to produce wide receivers at the CFF level, right? And I think CJ Smith currently, among all the wide receivers, is in the best place to do so. What do you think, Eliot? Am I jumping the gun there?
No, I mean, I didn't really see any coverage on this spring game. But based on his performance, yeah, I don't think you're jumping the gun. Somebody's going to get those passes. It's not like they're just going to start running the ball every time. So I don't think you're out of line in that thinking. And is CJ, is his real name Corey? I think it's Corey on.
Potentially,
you know that?
Okay,
I think it's Corey on Fantrax if anybody's looking for it. But I do know that he's fast, and I don't think he's very big. I think he was like 175, 180 pounds, but he's like 6'1".
Yeah, he's not very big at all.
So he's very slender, let's put it that way, for his height. But I think that 6'5", 6'1", or 6 foot, something like that frame and speed is at least promising.
Yeah, it is Corey Smith. Yeah, he's still listed under Purdue, I believe. So if you are looking for him, that's where you can find him. So yeah, definitely a guy that I'll be adding to my rankings this week. We'll finish up here with 2 more teams. Northern Illinois.
Actually,
go ahead.
I take that back. He is in there as CJ Smith, and he has already been transferred. Fantrax has been doing a great job. So I was close on his weight. He's a little bit heavier, 195 and 6'3". So I was right. He is pretty tall, but he's still.
Okay, there he is.
But yeah. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. I guess they have him in there twice, essentially, because they've been doing that a little bit recently as well. It's that time of year with Fantrax, right? Not poking fun at Fantrax. I understand that data management is hard, or database management is hard, but
Just imagine this in the with the portal. I mean, it's a full-time job for sure.
Oh yeah. Northern.
Just as Nick.
Oh my God, poor Nick. Let's talk about Northern Illinois here real quick. They had their spring game, and again, not too much to take away here. But the thing that I kind of came away with is one. It seems like Josh Holst is your starting quarterback here for NIU. There was some talk about maybe there being a competition here. He seemed to kind of solidified himself this past week during the spring game. All the beat reporters that are reporting on it were saying that he looks like he's in command of the offense. And with that being said, I think Holst could be a very sneaky CFF option here. A lot of people ask me, like, hey, who are some MAC guys that I can take at the end of drafts? I've not seen Holst go off in a single draft. I don't know about you, Elliot, but like, this is a guy that's had multiple games of 40-plus rushing yards last year, and he wasn't even the starter, right? He's going to be a dual-threat guy playing in the MAC there. It's going to be a rush-heavy team, right? They'll have Telly Johnson. They'll have Jalen Poe over there, right? I think that there's a decent chance. I mean, he could have himself a really nice year. He had 24.6 fantasy points in the game against Fresno State, 182 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 65 yards on the ground. Like, that's a nice floor. That's a really nice floor to get out of a quarterback, especially later in the year there. And then the other takeaway I had here was there's been a lot of talk from the NIU beat reporter scene about how like Telly Johnson and Jalen Poe are kind of 1A, 1B situation, but I didn't see Jalen Poe getting the special treatment of Telly Johnson, where Telly Johnson was held out of the spring or was kept on a pitch count because they specifically said they did not want to risk any kind of injury to him because they'll need him for the fall. Jalen Poe didn't get that same treatment, so I'm starting to wonder, I'm like, are we going back to Telly Johnson as a clear guy here at NIU? I don't know. What do you think, Elliot?
I mean, if I didn't watch any news coverage, I would have expected Telly Johnson to be far and away the number one guy and getting the majority of the touch share. But obviously, listening to the news is just confusing. But at the same time, when have we ever really relied on coaches to put out a clear image of what they're actually going to do during the year? So I think the actions speak louder than the words here, and I think that Telly Johnson's probably going to be their prized possession at running back, and that he'll get the fantasy production that most of us have been expecting.
I'm definitely hoping for. A couple of schools here I did want to point out. I don't have like full graphics and everything. I'm just going to run through the takeaways real quick or just little notes. At Wyoming, from Ryan Thorbird from Pokes Insider, he described Chris Durr Jr. as the go-to target for Caden Anderson. So, again, if you believe in a Wyoming wide receiver, there you go. We've had some decent ones over the years. And then Colorado State, once again, steady drumbeat. Rocky Beers once again impressed at tight end during the spring game. They did say that Colorado State's going to try to look for wide receivers to add through the portal. They already brought in Coach Antwi earlier this offseason. They're losing Dylan Goffney to the portal here. Obviously, Lewis Brown IV is gone as well. So we'll see potentially who they might add there. Any quick thoughts you might have on either of those two teams?
Not really, no.
All right, then last team we'll discuss here is San Jose State. This spring game was a sigh of relief for me because I was having an existential crisis over who the wide receiver one is going to be here at San Jose State. And thankfully, from all of the beat reporters and from the mouths of the words of the coaches themselves, we're getting a pretty clear answer, right? According to Andrew Pang at 247, quote, with Nick Nash moving on to the NFL, Trayshawn Hurry transferring, head coach Ken Matalolo had no trouble finding a new wide receiver 1 and 2 this year, referring to Matthew Coleman being the wide receiver 1 and Leland Smith, the Purdue transfer, as the wide receiver 2, right? Another quote from Christian V at the Mercury News. I'm not going to try to pronounce that last name. He says, quote, despite losing All-American Nick Nash, Craig Stutzman is confident in the potential of this year's offense. New additions to the wide receiver room, such as Purdue transfer Leland Smith, Dennis Skeeter, and returning junior Matthew Coleman, who is considered the room's leader, give the Spartans hope. So, that gives me a lot of hope that Matthew Coleman, despite the fact that he was not really mentioned a lot in spring reports this year, still is your wide receiver one. Wasn't like a one-time deal there in the spring game, or not the spring game, excuse me, the bowl game, and then he kind of disappears once practice actually gets kicked off. Sounds like they still expect him to be a clear number one guy for this offense. But there's a lot of love going towards Leland Smith, right? We got a quote here from Walter Eget, the starting quarterback, obviously. And he says, quote, regarding Leland Smith, we're going to be hearing his name a lot this year. He's very explosive. He's a big-time player. We're going to get him a lot of throws this year. That tells me that Leland's probably lined up for that Justin Lockhart role. And if that's the case, Leland Smith's a great shot at the end of drafts right now, I would say. So, yeah, I again, this spring game and all these interviews afterwards really kind of made me feel a lot better about drafting Matthew Coleman as high as we have been here over the last couple of months here. Is that your same takeaway here, Eliot?
Yeah, I mean, I took advantage of his kind of fall from grace a little bit with some of the reports that were coming out about him, and captured a few because I thought he was going too high. And then with some reports, people were kind of letting him slide, and then I started grabbing him in a few drafts. I expect him to kind of slowly. I don't expect him to be back where he was right away, but he'll probably slowly creep back up the rankings and ADP a little bit. Leland Smith is definitely somebody that has got me intrigued because I could see him being. He's 6'4". I could see him being kind of a lemon lane combination. He being more of the touchdown vulture, so to speak, and just getting a lot of value per reception, and then Coleman being the guy that just gets peppered with the volume.
Oh no, I agree. That's exactly how it was last year with Lockhart and Nash. I see no reason why they wouldn't try to do that again this year. Right, that worked out perfectly for them. So, alrighty. Well, we've talked long enough, Eliot. Appreciate you coming on here, man. Always a pleasure to have you on. All of you guys out there, we have come to the end of our show. Appreciate all of you guys for listening. If you have not already, make sure you leave a like, a comment, and subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast, make sure you follow the show and leave a 5-star review wherever you can. Make sure you guys check out the rest of the Campus to Canton Podcast Network for shows ranging on pretty much anything you can think of related to the college fantasy game. We'll see you guys back here next Monday, where to be determined topic will be discussed. But until then, I really appreciate all of you guys. Hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed week. See y'all.